It has been a while since I have told this story, and it still haunts me to this day. But here goes. It was January 1997 in Somerset, England. I had just started seeing a girl who lived in my village. We were heading out for dinner at the local pub. Her dad was good friends with my dad, so when I met her at her house, which was only a 20-minute walk away, there was no awkwardness with her parents. I went inside and sat with her mum and dad while she was getting ready. Her dad got me a bottle of beer and we started making conversation. She looked incredible when she walked downstairs. The pub was a short 3-minute walk away from her house. From what I remember, we had a great evening. I mean, this night was 20 years ago. We both had steak and sticky toffee pudding, followed by a bottle of red wine. Looking back, I do remember a man at the bar who wasn't local. He sat drinking alone and made eye contact with me quite frequently. He was bald, had stubble, and wore a wax coat. When we finished our food, we stayed for a few more drinks, then I walked her back to her house. Her parents were home, and we just started dating, so I did the gentlemanly thing, kissed her, and said goodnight. It started to rain, and being January, I had my raincoat on. I zipped up my jacket and began walking. The lamppost lit the way home, but I had to cut through a park, which I wasn't looking forward to. I walked through a cul-de-sac of houses and felt eyes on the back of me, and fast-paced footsteps in the distance getting louder as they were walking closer towards me. I was approaching the park and thought I'd be smart and walk towards my friend Jake's house. I knew he would be home, but my plan wasn't to go inside. I walked up his driveway and waited by his door, waiting for whoever it was to walk past. The footsteps got louder, and all of a sudden, they stopped. I couldn't see anybody. The moonlight and the lamppost offered a good amount of light to the cul-de-sac road. Whoever it was must have lived here, and they must have gone home, although I didn't hear a front door opening or closing. I waited 5 more minutes. I remember feeling nervous, but relieved at the same time. I began walking towards the park. The park had a gravel footpath that then went under a train bridge, close to where I lived. The rain began to stop and the wind picked up, and through the sound of the wind hitting the trees, the footsteps returned. I picked up my pace, and as I did, the footsteps behind me matched my speed. If not, they were going quicker. I stopped to turn around. The gravel footpath was lit by moonlight, and there was no one to be seen. I continued walking, and the footsteps were met with the sound of crunching leaves. Whoever was following me was not on the footpath, but walking along the grass. I sped up my walk into a jog, which then turned into a frantic run. The footsteps turned into a run, getting closer and closer to me. I was approaching the train bridge. I remember the panic and fear I was feeling. I didn't want to stop. I sprinted under the train bridge as a train went over the top of me. The loud, piercing sound of a concrete train going over my head only elevated my fears. The gate to the park was in the distance. I was edging closer and closer. I ran as fast as I could. I reached the gate railings, pulled the gate fast, and continued to sprint. I reached the main road, which I had to cross. I decided to look behind me. There, under the bridge, was a hooded man, inhaling and exhaling, hands by his side, staring at me. I crossed the road, but I wasn't home yet. I still had a 10-minute journey to go. The hooded man continued to follow me. I continued running the pavement along the roadside. To the right of me, there were a row of terraced houses. I cut down an alleyway and jumped the fence into one of the gardens. It took me back to when I was younger, playing knock and run and garden hopping with friends. But tonight, I wasn't with friends, I was alone. I waited in the garden and heard the steps approaching me. I heard a hand scraping along the brick wall of the house and heavy breathing. The man was walking further and further away. I looked through the gap in the fence and saw the hooded man walking away from me. He pulled down his hood and did a 360, looking for me. The man continued walking further and further away. As quietly as possible, I was able to open the gate from the inside of the garden. I began to walk as stealthily as I could, trying not to make any sound with every footstep I made. I was 30 seconds away from my home. I could see my home in the distance. Every other step, I would turn to look behind me, and with every step, I was getting closer and closer to being home. I managed to reach my front door, keys shaking in my hands. The door opened, I walked inside, and I closed the door behind me. I dropped to the floor. All of a sudden, my adrenaline left my body, and I was left with no energy. The following afternoon, I went to the pub with my dad. I ordered 2 pints and said to my dad, "Sit down, I'll bring them over." I asked Sheila, the landlady, "That man that was in here last night, the bald man with the raincoat, who sat at the bar, who is he?" She said, "Soon after you left, Phil the butcher came in and sat next to him. When the man went outside for a cigarette, Phil mentioned to me he looks identical to the caretaker at the school that was burnt down in the late 60s. And just as Phil was about to tell me what had happened, the man came back inside the pub." She never found out that night the true story, and I don't know what the man wanted, but I'm glad I never found out. I hope that you've enjoyed today's video, and if you'd like your story shared, please write to me at mrfearyoutube@outlook.com. And until next time, please hit the like and subscribe button.